My name is Amy Wilson, and my curiosity has always gotten me into trouble. Ever since I was a little girl, I've had an insatiable desire to uncover secrets and learn things I shouldn't. I just can't help myself. That thirst for knowledge has led me down some dark paths over the years and put me in danger more times than I can count. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened last Tuesday. It started off as an ordinary day. I woke up, got dressed, and headed to my job as a researcher at a small newspaper. The office was quiet when I arrived. It usually was that early in the morning. I made a cup of coffee and sat down at my desk to go over my notes for an article I was writing about the rise in crime in our city. As I sipped my coffee and scanned through statistics and police reports, something caught my eye. There was a pattern emerging of wealthy socialites being robbed in their homes in the middle of the night. This wasn't your average break-in, though. The victims all described the intruder as wearing a strange black mask and speaking in a distorted voice. He didn't take much, seemingly random, inexpensive items of little value. But he terrorized the women living alone in these fancy houses, threatening them with a knife and keeping them captive for hours before vanishing without a trace. The police had no suspects and no leads. But the more I read through the files, the more intrigued I became. Why these victims? Why these items? Why the bizarre mask? I needed to know more. This was the perfect story to sink my teeth into, a real mystery to unravel. I decided to do some old-fashioned investigating and look into the victims' backgrounds myself. First, I pulled up everything I could find on them online, social media profiles, news stories mentioning their names, charity events, and ribbon cuttings they had attended around town. They were all wealthy socialite types, married to powerful businessmen and philanthropists. But they didn't seem to actually do much themselves besides look pretty and get dressed up for parties. One thing that did stand out is that they were all regular attendees and donors for a new art gallery that had opened downtown a year ago called the Hadley Gallery. I searched the gallery's website and social media pages, but didn't learn much. The whole operation seemed kind of mysterious. No information about the owner, very little posted online about exhibits and events, no staff names or bios. Red flags started going up. I decided I needed to check out this gallery in person and get a feel for the space and the people involved. I came up with a cover story that I was a writer doing a piece on the revitalization of the downtown arts and shopping district. Surely they'd be eager to have the publicity. I set up an appointment to meet with the gallery director the next morning. When I arrived at the Hadley Gallery, I was surprised by how normal it all looked from the outside. It was a beautiful old brick building with big windows displaying colorful abstract sculptures and paintings. Inside was bright and airy, with high ceilings and minimalist furniture. A young woman with a stylish asymmetrical haircut and black-rimmed glasses approached me with a smile. "You must be Amy, the writer," she said with a friendly handshake. "I'm Claire Hadley, the director here. Let me give you a tour." We started with the front exhibition space, which was currently showing a collection of modern portraits. Claire spoke passionately about the artists and the evolution of the portrait through art history. She certainly knew her stuff when it came to the world of galleries and museums. As we wandered through sleek white rooms filled with provocative art, she told me about Hadley's mission to showcase up-and-coming local talent. Everything on the surface seemed legit, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking beneath. Call it a hunch or just my reporter's curiosity kicking into overdrive. I started probing Claire with questions about the gallery's funding and history, while closely watching her reactions. She remained calm and polite, but seemed eager to switch topics to safer artsy ground. I wasn't getting anywhere until I asked about the gallery's security. Claire's eyes flashed nervously, and she stumbled a bit over her words as she explained their standard alarm system and private security company they hired for evening events. I noticed a tiny bead of sweat form at her temple. Bingo! I was on to something, but I couldn't let on that I suspected anything strange. So I wrapped up the interview and Claire escorted me graciously to the front door, telling me to be in touch if I needed anything else for my story. As soon as I got back to my car, I jotted down notes about everything I had observed. My detective senses were tingling. Something secretive was happening here, and I had to find out what it was. Over the next few days, I spent all my free time researching the Hadley Gallery and the socialites who supported it. Everything was connected somehow, I just had to keep digging. Late one night, as I sifted through social media posts and old news articles online, I finally discovered a lead. One of the robbed socialites, Margaret Reynolds, had posted photos from a Hadley Gallery event 6 months ago. In one wide crowd shot, I zoomed in on a man's face in the background. He looked familiar. I enlarged the photo as much as I could, increasing the pixelation, but I could tell it was him. It was the gallery security guard I had noticed patrolling during my tour. Why would the robbery victims be mingling with the security guard? My investigative instincts were firing rapidly now. Using my honed internet sleuthing skills, I managed to identify him as Hank Rivers, ex-con. He had served time for armed robbery years ago. As I learned more details about Hank's criminal past, the coincidences kept piling up. He fit the description of the masked robber perfectly. And his robberies back then had a similar MO, going after wealthy women and taking odd personal items of little value. It had to be him. He had access to the socialites' homes through their connections to the gallery. He likely cased their houses while lurking in the background at swanky Hadley events. This story had just gotten a whole lot bigger. I was close to cracking a serial robbery case. I decided I needed to catch Hank in the act and prove he was the masked bandit terrorizing the city's privileged class. I couldn't go to the police just yet. I didn't have enough hard evidence. This was going to take some good old-fashioned stakeouts and tailing the suspect. Luckily, Hank drove a flashy vintage sports car that stood out in a crowd. I started following him after his evening security shifts at the gallery. Most nights, he just went straight home, a rundown apartment in the city's warehouse district. Pretty grim place for a supposed art enthusiast. One night, my persistence finally paid off. Hank left work but didn't go home. He drove to a parking garage downtown, parked his conspicuous cherry red Mustang, and changed into nondescript dark clothes. Now on foot, he took off down the street, and I discreetly followed from a distance, hiding in doorways and lurking in shadows. Very stealthy Dick Tracy moves on my part. Hank took a circuitous route using alleys and side streets, clearly trying not to be followed, but he didn't shake me. We ended up in the exclusive gated community of Avalon Estates where all the recent robberies had taken place. My adrenaline surged as I realized a break-in was imminent. This was it. Hank approached one of the sprawling luxury homes, slipping through backyard hedges and trees like a shadow. Moments later, he emerged wearing the eerie black mask described by the victims. I had him now. I pulled out my phone to take photos and videos as irrefutable proof of his crimes. Just as I went to get a clear shot of his masked face, the motion sensor floodlights suddenly flashed on, illuminating the yard in harsh brightness. Hank spun around, eyes locking directly on me. I froze. With a menacing glare, he started storming toward me. I turned and ran, dropping my phone in the process. I could hear his footsteps pounding after me as I sprinted down the dark street in sheer panic. I had stumbled into something far more dangerous than I had realized. My curiosity and amateur sleuthing had taken me way too far this time. Up ahead, I saw Hank's flashy Mustang parked under a street lamp. I made a beeline for it and jumped into the driver's seat. The keys were still in the ignition. I fired up the engine and peeled away just as Hank reached the spot where his car had been. In the rearview mirror, I saw him shaking his fist angrily at me. I had escaped by the skin of my teeth, with only my notes and memories of the encounter as evidence. Shaken, I drove straight to the police station. It was time to tell the authorities everything I knew. I recounted my investigation step by step, hoping they would take me seriously, but knowing how implausible it all sounded. The veteran detective on duty listened with a bemused look on his face before leaning back in his chair with a sigh. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You've been stalking this ex-con, illegally trespassing, and you want me to buy that he's some masked bandit mastermind targeting rich ladies? Come on now, ma'am. I hope this is all just part of some crime novel you're writing." My shoulders slumped. Of course they didn't believe me. Why would they take the word of an amateur wannabe detective with a wild story? The proof was gone along with my phone. For now, Hank was free, and I had made myself a target. Disheartened but not ready to give up, I thanked the detective for his time and left. As I exited the station, I felt a chill run down my spine. There across the street, parked in the